Good afternoon to everybody. I am Anura Mantunga of the Department of Archaeology, University of Kelaniya, Sri Lanka. Today, I am going to talk on Sri Lankan antiquities in the foreign museums, mainly in the Western world. For this, I have been persuaded by Dr. Nilesh Yadav on behalf of the Indian Council of Historical Research of the Western Circle for last 3 or 4 weeks, and ultimately the day has come, and now I have to talk about the topic they suggested, and I also agreed to talk on. I think you all know that Sri Lanka was under 3 Western powers since the 16th century until we get independence a year later of India in 1948. First, Portuguese were here from 1505 till 1658. They ruled the coastal belt of the country. At that time, the Sri Lankan kingdom was in the center, in the Kandian hills, ruled by the Sri Lankan Sinhalese kingdom, but the maritime provinces were under Portuguese. Then the Dutch came here and they ruled the country till 1797, and they also ruled only the maritime provinces. The same Kandian kingdom was lasted fighting with the Portuguese and the Dutch during this period. And English came here in 1797, and they also captured the maritime provinces with all the harbors and some of the most fertile areas, and ruled the country for some time. And then they could capture the central kingdom of the Kandy area, which happened in 1815, and the whole country were under British administration since 1815 till 1948. So during these 4 centuries, a large number of antiquities has been taken by them to their countries. Actually, some of them were looted and taken by force, or some of them are given to them by some local people, and they freely did it. You know, the Portuguese, they were not only interested in Sri Lankan cinnamon and Sri Lankan elephants, but they were interested on Sri Lankan ivories. A large number of ivory carvings were taken by them to the west. And the Dutch, they were also interested in cinnamon as a trade item, and also about elephants, that's also as a trade item. But at the same time, they were interested on the palm leaf manuscripts. One Dutch governor called Wilhelm Pelk, he collected a large number of palm leaf manuscripts and taken them to the Netherlands. Likewise, the Britishers, they also collected lots of materials from their ruling parts of the island from the very beginning. But after they captured the Kandian kingdom in the center, they accelerated of exploiting the materials there, and actually they have looted the whole country. How they have done it? Actually, they thought that the last king, the Sri Vikrama Rajasingha, he has hidden some of the treasures of him in several places at the Candian kingdom. So they wanted to search them. So Britishers, at the beginning, they, in the name of searching king's treasury, they searched treasures of the people. And they could collect a large number of items from the countryside. And not only they are greedy for this kind of antiquities, they were interested on them, and some of these materials were simply neglected at that time, and they also paid an attention of that also a reason for taking them easily for their countries. And in the beginning of, I mean, not the beginning actually, around 1830s, the Candian kingdom exposed to the other areas. At the beginning, there were no roads, no passable roads. I mean, we were devoid of wheel transportation at that time. But what Britishers did, they constructed roads and linked the central highlands with the maritime provinces, and that also it was one of the reasons for draining these items into the port cities and then abroad. And at the same time, a large number of, I mean, places deforested by Britishers. Actually, the Sri Lanka covered 75% of the land area by forest at that time. Actually, thick rainforest were at the highlands. Those forests were cleared by Britishers to grow cash crops, first coffee and then tea, and again in some extent rubber. Due to this reason, lots of covered areas were uncovered and exposed. Therefore, they could find some antiquities, especially the prehistoric materials, and also they could approach some remote areas through this work. And these are the reasons for the drainage of antiquities from Sri Lanka to the foreign museums in the 19th century. It has happened even before that, but in the 19th century, this has been accelerated due to this British policy. And at the last decades of the 19th century, some kind of academic boom was there in the Western world, and most of them pay attention on Sri Lanka. They considered Sri Lanka is one of the best places for studying human evolution and the evolution of botanical things and also zoological materials. And because this is an island in the tropics, so they paid an attention on to Sri Lanka. That also one of the reasons for their interest on Sri Lankan antiquities. On this background, from 1830 to 1930, most of the materials have been taken to the Western museums. Actually, not only to the museums, we can say to the Western cities, and some of them are in Western museums, but most of them were publicly auctioned and sold out for some other people. And we do not know where those materials are, but fortunately, we know the antiquities kept in the museums. Now we'll see what are those materials in the museums. We can divide them into 4 broad categories. One is the palm leaf manuscripts, and the other thing is anthropological items, anthropological, or you can say ethnological material. And then archaeology, prehistoric materials, excavated prehistoric materials, and fourthly, the other antiquities. We will see about them one by one. First, we see about the palm leaf manuscripts. The I already told you that some of the palm leaf manuscripts were collected during the Dutch period and they were taken to the Amsterdam. But the Britishers, from the very beginning, they also interested on the Sri Lankan palm leaf manuscripts. So they collected them uh, first by one of the British officers, and he was the first Chief Justice, Alexander Johnston. He came to Sri Lanka in 1808. He collected a large number of palm leaf manuscripts, books from the Buddhist temples and some feudal manor houses, and he took them to Britain. And then I think you know about Colin Mackenzie, because he worked in South India and also did the same thing there. He collected lots of material and they were taken again to the West, and some of those materials are in the Victoria and Albert Museum now. The largest number of palm leaf manuscripts were collected by a civil servant named Hugh Neville. He came to Sri Lanka in 1866 and was there till 1888. During this period, he collected antiquities and also lots of palm leaf manuscripts. His collection has been given to the British Museum, and now they are housed in the British Library. After formation of the British Library, they were shifted to the British Library from the British Museum, and there were about 3,000 palm leaf manuscripts. The Hugh Neville collection has been well catalogued by one of the librarian from Sri Lanka, Mr. K.D. Somadasa, and there were 19th volume, I think, of that, and it's a big treasure for Sri Lankans. But among those palm leaf manuscripts, there were no that much historically important books. I think you know about, we have Mahavamsa, Deepavamsa, Rajavali, that kind of very important historical books in Sri Lanka. But most of these books are literary works or Ayurvedic treatises or some kind of compendiums and some kind of black magic or white magic or some poems. They are very important in social point of view, but in historical point of view, they are not that much important when we compare them with the Mahavamsa or the Deepavamsa or the other historical work. But some books are on local histories, most of them written in the 18th or early 19th century in very rudimentary languages, not in very scholarly work, but these palm leaf manuscripts are very, very, very important for us. So most of them are at the British Library, and some of them are in the Wellcome Trust, and some of them are in the Munich, and some others are in the Amsterdam and some other places. So these palm leaf manuscripts are not only important for their text, but also some illustrations and their their content also. They are very important, and I think no one has able to read all of those things. We have seen some of them because there's a large number of books are there. What we have to do is we have to take at least the copies of those books to Sri Lanka again. So in addition to these palm leaf manuscripts, we have a large number of ethnological materials in foreign museums. You know that Sri Lanka are well known for devil dances, and Westerners were also interested on this devil dance. And for the devil dance, they use mask. mainly wooden masks of different type of wooden masks. Those masks are the one of the major items in the Western museums taken by Britishers and other Western administrators from Sri Lanka. A large number of masks were also collected by Hugh Neville, and he was I don't know, donated or the sold, or I don't know about exactly about that. And he donated some materials and he sold some of the materials. And masks are the largest collection of Sri Lankan materials in foreign museums. I think in the British Museum alone, there are over 3,000 masks. And in the Munich, there are also about 3 or 4,000 masks. In Switzerland also, and also Austria, there are some masks. In America, some of the American museums also, there are Sri Lankan masks. Like Southeast Asian countries, the mask of Sri Lanka has its own identity, and they are well attractive and also really beautiful and also ethnologically very important, this mask. Apart from mask, they have collected some of the materials belong to the Vedas. You know, the Sri Lanka has kind of hunter-gatherers called Vedas. Uh, Most of these Western scholars, they were interested on studying Vedas. I think you have heard about Seligman, who has written the book on Vedas and published it by the Cambridge, and Saracens, and Hugh Neville himself, and several others. They came here and studied on Vedas. As a part of their study, they have collected lots of materials of Vedas and taken them into the Western museums. They have collected their clothes, sometimes bark clothes, and bows, arrows, their, kitchen utensils, and some kind of domestic items, and so on. They have collected, and these Veda items are also one of the main items in the Western Museum. Some of them are in the Australian Museum also, because they are also interested on ethnological things. And Australian Aborigines also have some kind of affinity with Sri Lankan Vedas. Therefore, in some of the Australian museums, we can see Veda items. And then there are a large number of prehistoric excavated materials in some of the foreign museums. You know, the first Sri Lankan prehistorian, John Fall, who collected some stone tools from the central highlands like Muskelia and Kandy area. He donated some of the materials to the Madras Museum. So large number of his collection is in the Madras Museum, and that may be the biggest Sri Lankan collection in whatever Indian museum. There are some coins in the Indian Museum in Calcutta and a few masks, but the largest Sri Lankan collection in whatever the Indian museum is the John Fall's collection of stone tools. He was a very close friend of Robert Bruceput. I think you know about Robert Bruceput. So he was given those material to him for his observation, and then given them to the Madras Museum. And Saracen's collection is at the Pitt Rivers Museum in Oxford, and also in Switzerland. Part of them are in Switzerland, Basel. And Seligman's collection is also in the Oxford, and also Switzerland, and also some other places. These materials, I think I can say, almost all the prehistoric materials they have collected from 1885 to 1930 are not in Sri Lanka. All of them have been taken to their countries. I think they have done it freely at that time. We did not have laws to control it, and we did not see the importance of these prehistoric materials at that time. Prehistory has been considered not as archaeology at that time, just simple stone tools, useless tools, we thought so. But they have collected them, and now we have to take their permission to study those materials. And sometimes they do not allow us to see those things. Most pity thing is that, but most of them are there. Okay, and then prehistoric materials, we can go to the other things, the other antiquities. Among other antiquities, the largest number are coins. Almost every main universities in the Western world have Sri Lankan coins. Sorry. Most of them are copper coins of the Polonnaruwa period. Polonnaruwa, we can call it Polonnaruwa and Dhammadiniya periods. Apart from these coins, there are some kind of later period coins. I mean, the coinage has been changed from time to time. I mean, almost every 25 years, they have introduced a new type of coins by Portuguese and the Dutch people. So those coins were also collected. They are in those museums, and some early coins like I mean the punch marks. They are also some of the punch mark coins, and those coins were one of the largest numbers in foreign museums. Uh, British Museum alone have more than 900 Sri Lankan coins in their coin cupboards. Apart from coins, the other most important item is ivory. Some of the most beautiful ivory carvings from Sri Lanka are in Western museums. Some of the ivory caskets are at Vienna. I think there are two beautiful ivory caskets, and some are in the Munich museum in Germany. And apart from these caskets, there are there are ivory. These Buddha statues and some other statues, and some what we call the Ayurvedic instruments, some injections, kind of ivory injections, and this kind of board games. I mean, boards for games and that kind of things are made of ivory, and they are in those museums. One of the most peculiar thing is that none of the Portugal museums have Sri Lankan collections. I don't know what has happened to the material they have taken from Sri Lanka to Portugal and other areas at that time. But in Portugal museums, I couldn't find any of Sri Lankan ivories or other important materials. Probably they have given them to some other area. So probably they are in the churches or in some other personal houses or some kind of places. And coins, ivories, and then they have paid importance to the armories, the Sri Lankan cannons, and Sri Lankan guns, Sri Lankan swords, daggers, and that kind of items are in Western museums. I think in Amsterdam there is a beautiful cannon. I mean, with wheels. I think I can show you when you are asking the questions, and I'm very bad to talk with illustrations. I just like to talk, and after I will show you, I can share now. No, later. Let's see. When you ask questions, then I will show if you wish to see them. And what else? And we have a large number of agricultural implements also, like mammoths and hoes, and that type of agricultural implements are there, and also some of the fishing objects. Sri Lanka is an island, and fishing is one of the main practices of Sri Lankans, and these people have paid attention into that. And there are even some models of small boats and that kind of things, bill hooks, and those type of things are in the Western museums. So those are the general things in the West. But I would like to pay my attention into a few most important materials. One is the skull of Capitipola, the one of the national heroes of Sri Lanka. This skull has been taken to Edinburgh and kept there till 1954, and it has repatriated to Sri Lanka after independence. But taken this is very important incident. I think you have heard about Capitipola. He was the person who led the first independence struggle in 1818. Just after 3 years of capturing the Canadian kingdom, this person, he led a struggle against Britishers, and his struggle, we call it a Canadian, they call it a Canadian rebellion, we call it a Canadian uprising, or the first independence struggle. And his struggle, it ended in a failure, but it was the most dangerous and most tough struggle Britishers faced. It was more than the Sepoy rebellion and others. So they were about to leave Sri Lanka at that time, but anyway, they won the game, and what they did was they assassinated him, cutting his throat at Kandy publicly, and then after that, they took his skull and brought it to England, because they saw a difference in his head, because he was very peculiar person. He was a very brave leader, and they wanted to find out how this bravery came. Therefore, they took their skull into one of the medical institution in the Edinburgh and kept there, and returned it only after we got our independence in 1954. And the other items are the king's regalia, like the last king's throne, his crown, and his sword. These materials were taken to England, and some of them, I mean, with some other small items, they auctioned there. And these three important objects were kept in the Windsor Castle as a part of king's property, and they were given back to Sri Lanka in 1934 with the visit of Duke of Gloucester. At that time, they have returned them, and now the most important objects displayed in the Colombo Museum are this throne, crown, and sword of the last king of Sri Lanka. And lastly, I would like to say a few words on the goddess Tara's sculpture there. So there, if you are familiar with the British Museum, the entrance of the Asian section of the British Museum is housed, I mean, has been housed by this Tara's image. This image is a gold-plated bronze image of a beautiful figure of goddess Tara, and this figure has been taken from somewhere between Trincomalee and Batticloa, and collected by the then Governor Robert Brownrigg, and given it to the British Library in 1830. But this figure was kept in a sacred place because it was a nude figure in the upper part, and they did not want to display this kind of nude figure. They thought that it was not good to show it in public, and they kept it till 1960 in hiding. And then after 1960, the British Museum opened a new room. They call it a sacrotium. Some kind of that kind of objects were placed there and kept it there, but they cover the upper part by a rag and displayed it. I will show you that also when we are talking about, I mean, when you ask questions and when we discuss about these things. So these are the major items from Sri Lanka in the Western museums. This Tara is still there. We have a replica of it in Colombo Museum now, but the original one is in the British Museum. So to conclude, what we are going to do now to do those materials? Are we going to keep them there forever, or we are going to take them back to our country? So it's up to you. And I think we need a good discussion before taking any initiative. And we know nowadays the UNESCO has controlled the drain of this kind of materials by the Convention of 1970, but still the practice is happening without knowing to the officers, or without, I mean, without knowing to anybody. The things are taken to foreign museums, not only the museums, to the auction houses and other places, not only from Sri Lanka, but also from India and some other Asian countries. Thank you very much for listening to me, and would like to have a good discussion with you. Thank you very much. Thank you, all of my friends.